So there's always uncertainty is the only thing which is certain in life, right? All right, so we decided a panel discussion as of 7.5 minutes ago. Okay, so if anyone's interested in knowing what this panel discussion is about and asking me to set the tone for it, don't. So the idea is like this. I'm going to call on the stage a few of the people whom I thought would bring about a lot of different opinions about Ruby, technology, business, your business plans, aspirations, stuff like that, because we've had a lot of technical talks till now, right? Do you want to get really more technical? Ooh. Why not? See, you have to say why not. When you're in a technical Ruby conference, you must all want technology. But do you also want to learn about why people run a business the way they do? What choices do people make? If we are able to understand from the people about how they run their own businesses and what their expectations are, it's probably easier for us to figure out what we should do as developers. Now, quick show of hands here. How many business owners, co-founders, or CXOs in the audience? Okay. When you raise your hands as a CXO, it's not supposed to be like this. Right? You're proud of it, right? All right, cool. So remember, though all of you all will not be on stage, you are free to give an opinion that you have. So the rest of the people here are all developers or aspiring startups or representing your company. So I want to call on stage Ajey, Mikhail, Tim, Vipul. Come on stage. The reason I chose this panel, and you do realize the intense amount of discussions we've had for the panel, right? Nothing. I've called them on stage because this, I don't want it to be a question answer session by me. I want it to be a kind of a situation where this kind of panel has the diversity of one, age. Age, really. We're all in the, let's not talk about how old we are, but all of us have one thing in common, that we're all business owners. We also have one thing in common, that the age variance between these companies, startups, are, I think, spanning over 30 years. The other thing that is also interesting here is that the companies that all of us have started also have a very varying age group between, which is the youngest company here? But it could be like maybe 3 years, 5 years to almost 12 years, Tim? Yep. Yeah? And there's also a thing of revenues. There are, I mean, of course, we are represented by Indian companies, Indonesian company, Thailand company now? American company.
We incorporated in the
American company, Austrian, who stays in Thailand, as an American company.
Well, my two partners are Americans.
And an Australian company. And so let's get started, right? One of the questions that I want us to, and this is completely open, so anyone is free to take on, we'll answer these questions. And if there are questions in the audience already, please raise your hands high so that I can come and get you the mic or somebody will give you the mic. One of the questions I always have is, when you started up, did you have a business plan, a business vision? See how I like to get people stuck up?
Did you?
No, not yet. Hey.
Okay. So this is my second company. So the first one I had a business plan. The second one I got acquired. So so there's no business plan. But now we have business plan. So since now we have business plan, which we know what we are and what we do. But let's not talk about that, because that's like too big business plan right now as of today. Let's talk about the one which when we started. We really knew that what we are gonna do. We really knew that what we want to do. We were trying to create a niche space, and we kind of complemented a lot of consulting companies in India, including Josh and Big Binary and everybody else. So we were in a place where we were kind of complementary company, and it worked very well for us. And that's how we got acquired. So if C42 would have not been there, we would not be what we are today. So yeah, our plan kind of worked very well. So we did have a business plan.
Anyone else? Takers?
Well, I guess when we started, we knew what we didn't want to do. The company that I work for is a client services agency. We just knew that we wanted to get out of the traditional advertising game. So we wanted to work with clients with interesting content, interesting things to say, with projects that can make the world a better place, rather than just trying to advertise, and contribute to the big consumer machines. So that was the motivation. We don't necessarily have grand plans. We're happy to grow organically. But one thing that we're conscious of is just making sure that we're really always on the pulse of the things that matter in terms of keeping the company alive in the near to medium term future. So things like cash flow, things that can really be dangerous for a small business, we're always staying on top of that and making sure that the new business pipeline is big enough to keep us going over the next few months. And from there, as long as we do good work that we're proud of, work that our clients are happy to show off to their friends, then what we found is that work continues to roll in. So that's been a nice development for us.
Yeah. So I think we started with just 2 people or 3 people, and the original idea was just a couple of us who were kind of Rails contributors themselves wanted to work together. So I think 3 of us were in the Rails team. We were continuously contributing. We didn't have any intentions of actually hiring a lot of people, and we previously we just partnered with other companies, and we didn't have that in mind. But we realized that to actually grow, we had to also grow our own team, and that's how we evolved. So that was the base plan. First we just wanted to survive as a good open source company, and that's how I think we grew that, getting people who are into open source and then expanding on top of it.
Interesting. I started on a whim. 2007, had it gone my way, I had always had this in mind that I need to start up. And had I not got married, I would have probably started up in 2005. But then I got complacent, and I was like, yeah, there is still life. After 2 years, it was the itch was so strong that my partner, Setu, and me, we just quit our jobs on a whim and started up. No financial backing, because all the money that we had earned was all spent in the few of the nice pubs that you all know in Pune. I did not know anything about insurance at that time, so I didn't have insurance. We were both married, and both our wives were not working. And we had a home loan, a car loan, like any other standard IT professional. After 5 years, you pick up a home loan, a car loan, a business loan, a personal loan, a credit card loan. Heavy in debt, but one thing he said that if we don't quit now, we'll probably never start up. So we started Josh at that time without an idea what to do. It took me 6 months, and we both broke our heads on it and said, let's concentrate on only one thing. That time, it was like Ruby seemed to be the really cool thing at that time, which nobody in India knew about. It was really tough for us to tell people that we'll survive. It was tough for us to tell people that there's a technology, there's a language called Ruby which exists. But luckily we focused, and things went really smooth sailing after that. If I ever have to start up again, I'll never start up the way I did.
So for me, the important thing is actually to build a company that we can be proud of, and you can be proud of your company for a lot of different reasons. You can get rich, or you can make technically good solutions. But what I really like doing is building a place where people are happy to go to in the morning, and where everybody enjoys being there, So we're really just trying to run the company we all want to work for. And I talked about this yesterday with somebody at the speakers dinner, you don't need a ton of money for that. You don't need to be a Silicon Valley startup. You don't need to throw a ton of perks at people, Just be nice, be a person, treat other people like they're persons, Give them a sane work environment, give them sane working hours, make them go home, make them spend time with the people they care about, Your business will grow because people will be happy to come back, and when they're there, they will just, they will do whatever it needs for this company to succeed. So this is what important for me is creating lasting value, not quick money.
Nice. So, okay, is that the cue to dance? I don't know.
Get the table.
On the table. Okay, so if somebody has stopped singing, is that somebody here? Oh, that's not us. All right. We live with this. So in case anyone has any questions, we'll just have to speak louder. In case anyone has any questions, please raise your hand about this. Moving on to a little bit of technology. What are all the technologies that your company embraces? And Ruby is, I'm assuming, is a de facto standard, but apart from Ruby, what is it that you all promote?
We do everything actually, but no. So we don't have Ruby as a de facto standard. We don't. But if we are doing, yeah, let me complete. So this one works hopefully, yeah. So we don't have Ruby as de facto standard, but we do have Ruby as de facto standard when we are creating APIs. So. But yeah, if you ask us that 100% of Gojek code is written in Ruby, no, it's not. Gojek has one of the biggest ride-sharing service in Indonesia. We are largest, and the entire thing is run on Ruby, so that is good. We do a lot of API calls. We do around 125 million API calls per second. We do 125 million API calls per second. Not much, not reaching the
125
million
API calls per second.
Yes, internal calls, yes. We had, at any point of time, we had around 2.5 million customers online. We do a lot of stuff which actually uses Ruby, but we do a lot of stuff which just does not use Ruby. So we use Ruby for statistical number crunching. We use Ruby for our Rails APIs, for ride service. We use Ruby for all our OMSs. Like for our Go Food is the largest food company, largest food delivery company except China in the world. We do more than 250,000 food deliveries every day, which is like, if you combine all of India, it's still like double than that. So we are pretty big in that sense. But that all OMSs are done in Ruby. But apart from Ruby, we use Go a lot. We use Clojure. We use Java. Somewhere we use Python. And very few places we use JavaScript. And apart from that, we have Swift 3 and Java for Android. And now we are doing Kotlin as well. So we have around 250 microservices. So a team is not that big, but the kind of challenges we have that allows us or forces us to think to use the right language for the right kind of problems. So a lot of transactional workers, they are in Go. A lot of APIs, they are in Ruby. Lot of AI, machine learning, big data, all this stuff in Python and Scala. A lot of functional programming stuff around finding driver and thinking through the driver logic and all this stuff, that is in Clojure. So it is around that. So it's pretty vast in that sense. Yeah. So that's what we do.
I think he covered all languages.
No, there are multiple languages, like basic.
For us, we just try to stick to Ruby on Rails most of the time. Like when Alexa came out, everyone was also trying to look at that. We believe that for the backend, for the timing, we are set on just doing Ruby on Rails. We do try to explore a lot on the different fronts. Like we do a lot of React. We do React Native. Like when Ruby Motion was around, we did a lot of Ruby Motion, as well as these days we are also doing Elm and exploring other languages alongside on that fronts that we want to get rid of all of the things that we are facing with. Even after the evolvement of like ECMAScript 6 and all, we still face a lot of issues with JavaScript. So we trying to go into Elm and try to explore along that same lines, try to explore other ML languages.
It's actually pretty much the same for us. We mostly do Ruby on Rails. We do a lot of React lately because almost every client just requests it, and then we have to talk them out of it because actually 90% don't really need React, but it's requested a lot. We have a couple of legacy Node.js projects that basically you get assigned to as a punishment because nobody really wants to work on them. We have one, come on, who really wants to do that? We have one Clojure project, but that's pretty much just in maintenance mode. Writing a lot more TypeScript lately because at least it makes JavaScript somewhat digestible. And personally, I quite got into Rust lately, which doesn't really fit with our day-to-day business requirements, but it's what I do recreationally. I started contributing a lot to Rust lately. It's fun. That's it. Oh, we're doing Python, of course, like most other people when it comes to data science or any data pre-processing, language processing. That's generally built externally in Python and then just fed back into Rails somehow.
I actually brought Ruby into the company when I joined 8-ish years ago. And I guess at that time it was close to the peak of that popularity cycle. Rails was the hot thing. And it's funny, right now in Australia at least, we have a new hot thing. It's Elixir. And in fact, we're seeing much of our Rails community, or the Ruby and Rails community, go off and create this offshoot community, the Elixir community. And you can see some of those same signs, like you go to lunch with someone who likes Elixir, they won't stop talking about it. And that's exciting, it's great. But, thinking of technology, as a business, we need to keep producing things efficiently and understanding the ins and outs of the technology we use to make our products. Because our clients don't come and tell us how to build things, they just tell us what they want built. And we need to make smart decisions to do that. So that's why, like I said this morning, we're sticking with Ruby, and we can find ways of doing things better in Ruby without having to ditch the entire ecosystem. So I think that's pretty exciting. There was a cost to switching approaches, even within the same language, but I think it's all made us better developers, and we've been able to have a lot of good discussions around programming practices that you might not otherwise have if you're just filling in those 3 buckets of M, V, and C. Apart from that, we probably do what a lot of you do. We use React on the front end, and I don't write a lot of code, but the thing I like about code on JavaScript, the thing I like about React, though, is it's simple to understand. It's just one principle. You have components, and you mount components within components, and so on, and the data flows in one direction. We did some dalliances with Angular and other things like that, but they all prove far too complex, so we're quite happy with that stack at the moment.
So interesting. We have a lot of things in common where, of course, it's all Ruby, and front end is usually, I think, React and Angular too. I'm not much of a front end person, but in my company, a lot of people are doing React and Angular. We've also started doing a lot of Go. So it's like in 2007 when we had to bet on a language. We actually bet on Ruby at that time. 10 years later, we are now betting on Go. Actually, we bet about 3 years ago, and we are taking Go on in a big way. Having said that, it's also important to realize that being a very technology-strong company, we are also trying to shift our focus a little bit into trying to diversify into industry focus. So a lot of machine learning, deep learning stuff is what we started picking up, but I don't want to go down the Python route because it's still older. So we are actually looking at things like TensorFlow. It's still new, so it's still got some time to pick up, but when it does, we probably want to be there at the right place at the right time. All right. Just quick question. If anyone has questions, just raise your hand so that I can see you all want a question from the audience. We'll help you all out. So moving ahead, there you go. Can we have a mic coming up right to you?
Hello. So the question is, when you're building a company right from scratch and developing, I'm assuming if you're developing one particular product, which is a distributed system, so do you think there is a possibility that using open source becomes cumbersome, and at some point of time, it's a better strategy to use a private dependency server for your distributed systems?
I'm sure everyone's going to take that question.
Okay.
Using open source is not cumbersome, but using software as service is cumbersome. What you do, and it is also a fine line of you try to do something on your own versus try to let somebody else do it for you, right? Sometimes you get so lazy that you use modules like WritePad, and which is like just putting spaces on the right-hand side of numbers on the bulleted list, and the developer took it off, and internet shut down for like 6 hours, right? When people just go extreme about being lazy and start using open source that way, they're actually abusing it, and also they are not in the right path of trying to be curious and trying to do things, small things on themselves. Same with software as service. We start using software as service at everything. It's very good to do that. When you are a startup and when you are building a product and you want to get something out, you use 90% external component, put your small business logic, and just get up and running. It's absolutely fantastic. At some point of time, at some scale, every scale has a demand from its own saying, you should stop using this now and start doing on your own. So that balance, I leave up to you when you find that balance. For us, that balance, so a lot of companies have that balance. They found it out, like Facebook couldn't get out of PHP, and they wrote their own compiler, right? WeChat couldn't get out of JavaScript. They wrote their own compiler, and things moved on. So it's up to you where you find yourself. But at some point of time, generic software or generic open source doesn't serve the purpose. You try to patch it, mutilate it, or whatever you do. But at one point of time, you have to say, okay, this is the fine line. I'm going to do it myself. But it is never cumbersome. It's only cumbersome when you don't realize that you actually abused it.
Well, I do believe that you should concentrate on what your product or service is the core skill. For example, if you want to accept payments, are you going to go building a payment gateway? Though it might sound weird, there are companies who actually do that because they can and they want to. But the choice is if you're going to concentrate on your core strength, then you decide that I want to use either an open source component, I want to use a service, I want to build it in-house, I want to give it outside. You outsource not for cost, but you outsource for expertise. And when you keep that in mind, your product's always going to be right. After a particular stage, you realize, I want to own it. Like Ajey said, own it. But the examples that he gave are people who owned the code and wrote their own compilers after they could afford it, after they got really heavily funded.
So that's true. That's true. Of course, we are also thinking to do those things because we can today at the scale we have to do that. Not only we can afford it, but we have to do those things today because the generic software sometimes doesn't fill our needs. What Gautam is saying is absolutely fantastic and right. But one of the things which you need to understand, there are always two ways of outsourcing. One is for capacity. Second is for capability. As long as you are outsourcing for capability, it's good. The day you start outsourcing for capability, that means you are not running the right thing. So always and always go for the things which you can actually are not your core business. So we existed as a DevOps and a scaling and automation company because it was not consulting company's core business to get into DevOps. And it was our job was to do that, right? If you're not running infrastructure company, why you are trying to run those things? That's why AWS exists, right? So the point is you need to figure out what point of time you need to fold that into your company because it's too generic and doesn't suit you anymore.
Yeah, simplest example is like many of the clients that we start working with, they have their own, like they maintain their own CI servers, like they'll run their own Jenkins or something like that. So that's the like basic example. Do you want to spend, do you or the client want to spend time on maintaining or like spending time on that, or just you can like afford to just outsource it and start using a service to not have the headache of maintaining those things. So there's a, like you need to decide based on that.
I'm special. So I see mostly tech people and tech business owners. So my question to all, like on the panel and the audience, what is your dynamic with your non-tech partners or co-founders? And what is that one thing that you typically look for in a non-tech co-founder?
Non-tech co-founder. You're asking, I think you're asking technology companies to have a non-tech co-founder. If I had ever done that, and I don't have a non-tech co-founder.
No ifs.
All right. So if I had a non-tech co-founder, I would probably ensure he or she is stinking rich, man. I mean, anyone? I don't know how to answer the question for non-tech co-founder.
Anyone in the audience?
I'll talk in the meantime. I feel very lucky to have two other partners in the business, and we share responsibilities fairly evenly. We have someone like me who cares a lot about development. We have someone who cares a lot about design, and someone who helps run the business and offers sort of creative director kind of role. And 3 is a great number, I think, because it gives you the opportunity for some healthy tension to be there. You don't always want agreement and everything, because some tension can bring out some discussion and ultimately lead to something good. And I think it also reduces your stress. I definitely wouldn't like to be a solo founder, because that's a lot of responsibility on one person. And the whole reason we start companies is to share the load across several people. So if you can do that at the top level as well, then I think that's a great thing to follow.
So three means you are hustler, hacker, and designer, right?
Well, to rephrase your question, instead of saying a non-tech co-founder, did you actually imply if you have your co-founders, how do you distribute responsibility of business, tech, and everything else?
Sort of. I mean, I specifically mean non-tech, but you could phrase it that way. Sure.
Yeah, because in any business, somebody has to take the role of either the sales, the finance, the strategy, the technology, the execution, and even managing customers, managing employees. And
sure. Yeah, let's approach it that way. Let's approach it that way. Yeah.
So actually, I will say two things. First, there's a way when you don't have co-founder, and there's a way when you have co-founder, right? When you have co-founder, things are very different. And I believe that it's not about having non-tech or tech co-founder. It's about having the focus, like what kind of, like, for example, if you look at CodeMonk, which was like C42 and CodeEdition merged, and if you look at me and Sidhu, we are very two different kind of people. And while you can call us both of us tech, today, if you look at us 10 years back, then Sidhu was more tech than I was. And if you look at today, Sidhu is more people's person and more like what you say, mentor, suit. No, not suit. It's like he's like more mentor and teacher compared to me. So that oscillation of the being tech non-tech matters. It's all about it's more about your focus, your responsibilities. Somebody in consulting firm, somebody has to take care of sales, somebody has to take care of marketing, somebody has to take care of people. Somebody has to take care of finance. And not every tech guy is good at that. Not every guy wants to do that, right? So you have to figure it out. And 4 of you can't do it, 5 of you can't do it, get somebody else who can do it for you. So it's not about having tech or non-tech. It's more around having complementing your skills across the board, where nobody asks questions about the person who is responsible for doing a decision about his decision. So today in Gojek, in Gojek, we have Nadeem and Kevin and Andre and Sidhu and all of us over there. But if we go and say that this is what we are supposed to do, this is how it gets done. So having that say is more important than having a non-tech co-founder. So you should ensure that all of your team members have a say, and you should listen to their say.
If I may just quickly add to that point, right? Because the tech, non-tech conversation is an interesting one, but what I've noticed over time is whatever you plan up front never holds. So you can divide certain responsibilities between you and your co-founders when you start, but very quickly, none of that holds. What happens is, what you can do, you do. And in that smaller group, you know whether your colleagues are doing it or not. You know what I mean? You don't have to go through a performance review process. So if that is true, what we figured out over time is, if you're a founder and you have co-founders, you know whether you're doing your work or not. That's easy. That's a solved problem. What becomes harder is how quickly and easily can you make decisions between yourselves without fighting to a point where you don't like each other anymore, or fighting to a point where you can't make decisions anymore, either way, right? So a stalemate or a failure of relationships. And I've been through both. And he's not an easy person to argue with, just so you know. But I would put it this way. The reason the tech to tech matters is because you have a common framework for decision making, usually. And tech to non-tech, what I would say is it's equally important that you evolve a framework, whatever it may be. And that's always unique because you're unique people. But the point is, how quickly and fast can you make decisions, move on to the next decision without either stalemating and without getting upset with each other.
So interestingly, the takeaways for all the people in the audience who want to or wish to or hope to start up one day, don't start up alone, and ensure that you have a complementing co-founder or founders. And just an add-on bit of advice, as Tim said, 3 is the right number. 4 is probably a crowd sometimes. Okay? But having said that, most of the people here are still in their core development stage. So here's a really tricky question. Before the tricky question, Ajay has a tricky answer.
I had 5 co-founders in Code Ignition.
And see where it's got you.
And see where it's got me. And I'm very proud of all of them. And so I will say yes, 3 and 4 and 5, they are numbers. And 3 is ideal thing because the touch points are small. The more and more you have co-founders and more you have people who make a decision, a partisan decision, that means you have to talk a lot. Communication is very important. So if you have 3 and you don't talk to each other in a day, then it sucks. But if you have 5 and you talk like every 5 minutes, it's perfectly fine.
Just wanted to add it to your advice, right? If you're thinking about starting your own, don't be scared because none of us really know what we are doing either, you know? It's true. We talked about this. This was literally the first.
We didn't even plan this panel.
Exactly. And no, but this is the reality, you know. Like you always learn, and if you're not gonna learn, you're not gonna survive as a business. So every day you should recognize that you have failings and that you have to fix them, and you'll never know it all, right? So it doesn't matter. Just get started. What you don't know today, you'll learn it tomorrow.
And anytime you see a person wearing a suit and giving you gyan about how we pivoted, count failure. Yeah. And then we pivoted again, count failure too. So we've seen about people starting up. So if you ever hope to start up, that was the gyan. But since most of the people, and I'm assuming most of the audience here are in the rising stage of their career trying to be good developers, here is a controversial question to ask, as usual. How do you hire? And once you hire, how do you retain? Ooh.
I'm very proud of that, actually. That question is very good. So just to put a number in perspective, we had only 1 person leaving us in last 2 years out of 100. And we had only 1 person. None of our original gang has left us till now for last 5 years. So the 50 people which we have been together, they have been with us till now. So I'm very proud of that. So that also builds like what we do to actually make it happen, right? First, we are very selective. We are very choosy. We are like so I don't know how many of you guys believe in arranged marriage, but it is kind of arranged marriage. And so the thing is you can just be a bit more choosy around that, right? So we look for traits. So one of the basic traits is so we don't call ourselves IT team, and we don't call ourselves engineering team, we call ourselves product engineering team. Because when we say I want people to be hands-on, that means I want a product manager who is supposed to manage product, not the people, should be writing acceptance criteria, should be writing stories. However senior he is, how many people he has below him. And there is nobody below him, actually. We don't have that. Or whoever comes into company in engineering side or product side, they will be hands-on. That means they have to go through test, how much ever senior you are. So a lot of drop happens at that level. We get a lot of very senior guys from different startups or different companies, and when say, okay, welcome, and they're very happy, we talk to them 9 o'clock, and 10 o'clock we say, hey, here is a laptop, and here's a problem. And they're like, okay. So either some of them don't do it, or some of them we tell them upfront and they don't complete it. And it's okay. So we select 1 out of 250 or 300, which is absolutely fine. And that's how we could not grow. We have not been able to grow the way other companies grow. Like somebody will come in and just say, okay, they hired 200 people in 3 months. I wonder how? Huh? 1,000. I don't know how that happens. So for example, I'll give you one example.
Let's just take a show of hands here.
What?
How many here have been part of, what's it called in the campus?
Recruitment.
Mass hiring.
Mass hiring, yeah.
Right? Don't feel shy.
Yeah.
Right? Have you all suffered? Are you all working in that same company? How many months did you last there? There you go.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
6. You, my man, are the exception which proves the rule.
They're always outliers. They're always outliers.
I'm sorry, I really wanted to point one out here, right? I got mass hired like this, and the mass recruiter shut down before I got out of college. So I had a job, and then I didn't have a job.
So one thing which we do is we look for people. Second, we look for what traits. We don't look for how much they know. We want to know what they don't know, so that we can teach them. How much they know is something very, very orthogonal, because whatever they know, it might not be used to us. But what we want to know, how much you know, and how much you don't know, and are you curious or not, are you a learner or not? And we ask those questions. We don't do whiteboarding, because nobody, including myself, nobody can write code without looking at the internet, right? And if you try to do that, it's just shaming somebody, grilling somebody is just useless. You are like humiliating them. So don't do that. So test them for person, people, choice, logic, all this stuff. And what we do, we make them go through our interview process. Those are mostly discussions. And they meet random spectrum of people, from junior to the senior most. And all of them, I ask one question saying, if this guy comes into the company, will you be willing to work with him for next 1 year? If one of them says no, we don't hire that person. He might be a very great person, might not be suitable for one guy, and I can't punish somebody who is already in, right? So we don't have very high standards, we don't have very high logic, we don't do all those tests. What we do is like we ask you whether you can type or not. And if the typing looks like a Ruby or Java or some other language, if it does look like something like that, does it run? If it does it run, does you have some test kind of thing? If you do have that, does it press yes on all of it? If all that happens, yes, if you know how to type, you can come into Gojek.
How do you retain?
How do I retain? Okay.
Wait. Let's take on other questions first. Anyone else wants to talk about how they retain without using the salary word?
A salary
is not
I think
retention.
these days salaries, even if you give like the best salaries, it's still hard to hire people.
How many of you all thought that salary is retention? How many of you all hope salary was retention? Hope? I'm pretty sure now nobody's going to raise their hands like, I hope my boss doesn't see me here.
So we have been hiring like for the past 3 or 4 years, and we have worked for all of these years remotely. So most of the time I think we never have done like the traditional interview, like ask questions, get responses, because we are not physically even meeting the person. For us, always, and even today, what we try to do is work with that person for a week or a month, pay for whatever they are working with us, and ask them to like evaluate whether they themselves are also a good fit for the company or not. So we ask, we work with the people, we solve some issues. If they are okay with those issues, we ask them to actually work with us on client projects which are billable. And if that is fine, only then like we. So here's the thing: it's not just about the person knowing some things; it's also about how they are handling the communication, because it's a client project, and how well they are fitting in the company, and how well they are receiving what feedback that you are providing or what the client's expectations are. That is also quite important. So more than that, like we had excellent people who are who might be pretty good and know a lot of things, but it's more about them accepting that, okay, this is communication is also pretty important when you're working on the projects.
So I personally hire mostly for cultural fit, not so much for raw technical skill, and there's a very simple reason for that. I can teach somebody to be a better programmer, I cannot teach them to be a better person. That was their parents' job, and if they failed at it, I'm not going to fix this, you know. I know it sounds funny, but it was actually serious. And this really solves the problem of how you retain developers, because software development is a long game, right? It's a team effort, and it doesn't help you if you hire one rock star that nobody else likes. A software development team should be cohesive, and they should be able to have heated arguments and then walk away from them and have lunch together, because that means they care about the right things, right? They can be friends, but they can argue technically. And once you have that sort of culture, retaining employees is not so hard, even if you can't throw money and errand chairs and what have you at them, Because at the end, people want, they want to be happy. Make them happy.
Yeah, I think if you're a small company and you're trying to find ways to keep your staff happy and engaged and willing to stay with you for a long time, even when there are big, rich companies in your same space, there are still lots of things that you can do. For instance, our company only works a 4-day work week. So for a 20% reduction in our working week, we all get 50% more weekends every weekend of the year. And that's selfish because we would like that too. So we all get Fridays off. And that just enriches everybody's lives. More time with their friends and family, more time doing other things they care about. And that makes them better software developers too, because they're happier and healthier. And so as a result of this, we've just learned to become more efficient, deliver things faster, and make sure we communicate effectively. And those are all traits that also serve a software team, and also being part of that high-performing team makes you happy as well. So there are plenty of things that you can tweak in order to make your company stand out, and in order to give people a good all-round life. And that's what they appreciate and may choose to continue living with you.
So I'm not going to talk about the hiring because it's kind of covered, but some of the retention strategies that we have at Josh, we love people going to conferences. We love people speaking at conferences. So we have a blanket statement that if your talk ever gets selected in any conference in the world, we will fly you there, we'll take care of your stay, and we'll take care of all expenses and treat you like a king or a queen. If you submit a talk to a proposal, you submit a proposal to any conference and it doesn't get selected, we will still fund up to $2,000 per year, per person. We found a lot of people planning their travels accordingly to like, hey, I haven't been to Hawaii, let's go to Aloha RubyConf. It doesn't matter if your proposal doesn't get accepted. But it actually got people traveling, so they get better experience out of it. They meet other Rubyists, and that's helped us out a lot. The other thing that we started is we have a lot of parties in our office, which have reduced off late, but the parties are fun. We play football every Wednesday, and it is crazy, but it tends to add to some sort of retention strategy just because everyone's doing something different other than coding. Our recent initiative of Code Curiosity, which started off as an experiment to help all our team members contribute to open source, and we reward them for it, actually turns out to be a community initiative which is gaining some kind of traction with the stall outside. But such kind of extra initiatives, I would love to come to a 4-day week. We tried it sometimes in the middle. We had some of our customers support it, but we have a very conscientious bunch of people who want to also work on a Friday.
Yeah. So we do whatever Gautam said. We do all of that. Plus we do 4 days a week, but not in his sense. We have 20% time for developers to do whatever they want to do every Friday. There is a strict instructions around this saying you don't estimate for 10 days. You estimate for 8 days. That means 2 weeks iteration. So we do that. Apart from that, I think people is very important. We really do not have heroes. We don't celebrate heroes because it's always team effort. And we don't like shame somebody for if they have failed because they have complementary skill. So we allow people to make mistakes. So it's more around family. We tell people that if you're gonna expense this, if you're gonna spend this money when you are on your own, you can expense it to company, that's fine. If you're gonna purchase this book anyway, you can expense it to company. As long as you do whatever you can do as personal person, as long as you have that ownership, not because company is doing something for you, don't do that for it. If you do it for yourself, we'll take care of it. And that kind of gives a sense of family, that kind of, because we couldn't pay, when we were doing our startups, we couldn't pay as great salaries as other companies are, and we never do that. Because if salary would have been the one of the major things, then startup and co-founders would go to investors and say, hey, you gave me $5 million, plus give me $5 more million for actually keeping incrementing salary every 6 months. So that is not the thing. The thing is more around environment and culture, and thing is more around taking care of them as if they are family. A lot of people put a lot of policies. Policies are actually in companies to actually avoid 5% of people who are abusing the policy. But that punishes 95% of people. So what we do, we don't have policy, but we try to pick those 5% people and tell them very strict warning. If you do it next time, you're out. And we don't tolerate that. So we don't have no asshole policy as well. So that is very important. Very, very important.
It's like our code of conduct for the conference. Be nice. If you want the details, come and meet me. So wrapping up, because it's time for tea. It's been an interesting, I'm going to keep, I'm not sure. Are there any questions? I saw some hand raised. Okay, there are a couple of questions in the crowd. We'll take the last 2 questions, and then I'll quickly wrap it up. We'll take one up front here first, please.
Hi, my name is Shaunak. So I have like two questions. What is the average experience level in your companies of employees? And if you have like a relatively young team who's not so experienced, what effort should you take so that they grow to a better developer or become a better team?
That's a big question. So if we have anyone who wants to take it before Ajay.
No, I'll take it because I will tell you this because I have like average age is like 3, and nobody actually should think that age brings the experience. It's the hard work which you go through that brings the expertise. So you have to differentiate in experience and expertise, and all our guys except me are like 27, so which is like really crazy.
Any person who's 27 in the audience here right now?
I am.
Yeah, I'm old.
Yeah, so for us, again, the same thing. The person can be zero experienced, but he might be still in college and doing GSOC. So it doesn't depend on how experienced they are versus what expertise that they have and how well they are within the community. Do they know things which a person on an average who has worked with Rails like 1 or 2 years should know. So it doesn't depend on how many years they have worked, but more about what expertise they have and what potential they have.
Mikhail?
So I want to answer the second part of your question, right? I try to improve people by giving them ownership. Like if you micromanage people, treat people as grown-ups. If you micromanage people, they will eventually stop doing things until you tell them to again, which means the moment they finish one of their tasks, they will sit down and watch YouTube until you come back and give them more work, right? And this is not what you want, right? You don't want to be babysitting, right? You want a team and you need to set your expectations right. You want to be able to hand off a body of work and receive a result back. And this actually does help people grow. Obviously, there's a lot more hand-holding with our juniors, right? I don't expect them to go and build a perfect solution, but I want them to use their own brains first, right? You give them a task, they go off, they plan, they come back to you, then you walk them through it and you say, hey, why did you think this was a good idea? Why did you decide to build it this way? And in this way, both sides profit, right? Because you get a better idea of how your employees think and maybe in which direction to nudge them. And they, from the very early on, get this feeling that they actually own the code they're working on and that they are responsible. And I think this helps make people grow a lot.
Yeah, I would echo what Mikhail just said. If you place trust in people, they'll always instinctively want to return that trust. And I think it's perfectly fine to give people tasks that are just outside their boundaries of current ability, because that's the motivation for them to start reaching beyond that, as long as they have support. And that's sort of a part of any good team environment, is to provide that support. And we encourage people to work out loud, basically, to share their working as they go, so that the team can be there for that support whenever it might be needed. And I think that also gets people practicing at communicating their ideas, which I think is one of the most important things you need to do as a software developer. It's not about the code you write, it's about how you organize your thoughts and share that with people. So that's pretty much the key to how we organically allow people to grow.
And to answer your question about age and training and how you help them out, let me try and be interactive. The next generation of Josh, if you're in the audience, could you stand up? People who feel you're the next generation of Josh. The people from Josh who believe they're the next generation of Josh. Right? This is my team. All of them feel themselves that they are the next leaders in Josh. Thank you so much. Please have a seat. But we help them out. I love going to college and hiring straight from campus, because they're like, they can be molded to the right practices. The analogy I had given to someone earlier was, you all seen the movie Matrix? Right? Do you remember the kid who was actually born outside the Matrix without that stuff behind his head? That's them. Because they are actually not coming up with any kind of background of any prior languages, and you're getting them straight into the Ruby world, learning the right way to do things, and moving on. So you train them, get them to conferences. Age does not matter, and it just helps. I'm not sure if the person behind still has a question. Oh God, we've got 2 questions. Okay. Should we not take more questions? I think we should be able to take only 1 more question, otherwise y'all don't have a tea break anymore.
Yeah. My question is for Ajey actually. So we have this problem at our company as well. So we don't want heroes. But then how do you compensate someone who goes out of his role and does something extra other than his responsibilities?
Do you mean compensation only by money?
Compensation, yeah, in terms of salary or maybe training or anything.
Sure.
Anything beyond his salary.
Okay. So it's always like this, right? So I worked in a company called ThoughtWorks for 10 years. And the reason I could not quit was very simple reason that every time I got a job offer, which I got very frequently, I looked at my salary and I looked at the kind of money value what I get out of ThoughtWorks. I read those 2, and it was always less than what was offered to me, always, right? And the reason I quit was because I was just wanted to do something else, not because I was pissed with ThoughtWorks, because when I quit, I didn't have a job. I didn't go for a job. So come back to your question, the way you measure somebody, leadership quality is more around how much responsibility somebody takes and how much ambiguity he wants to deal with. And that's what leadership quality is, right? And if you define leadership like that, so basically you have coding or writing stories or doing analysis as your basic traits in being BA, QA, UI, UX, or developer or engineer or whatever, right? And then the leadership comes from how much response you want to take and how much ambiguity you want to deal with, whether it's customers, whether it's a product, whether it's your engineer or whoever it is, right? And once you see people actually sparring with you on that level, you will figure out how much you want to pay them. And it's very easy. You should go and ask them. Like, look, I think you should get paid more. How much you should want to get paid more? And it's very honest one-on-one question. A lot of times people come and compare among themselves and all of a sudden you justify them. All this stuff will keep happening. But most probably if you think about them and say, if I would be that person, how much I should get paid? And that is a very difficult question to answer, honestly. And you kind of become selfish and a lot of other stuff happen like, no, I can live with this small money. No. Be as much as you can if you're in that place. And think about it. And the only way to measure it, that how much responsibility and how much ambiguity somebody is dealing with. It's not about somebody like putting 12 hours a day and 18 hours a day and is very hardworking. That's not the right thing because that guy will die in 6 months. So please do not like compensate or like celebrate those kind of people. I really do not like people working beyond it at 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock in our offices. I really ask them forcefully on messages saying, please tell me schedule of your team when they are taking 1 week off, each team member. I do that. So make sure you don't celebrate those things. So you have to figure out how you are defining that, that we should compensate him more. And if you have figured out that out, and as long as it is about responsibility, then you should think out, if I would be doing this, how much I should pay him.
So interesting. That question was to Ajey, so let's not talk about that anymore. No, we're just joking. But it's time to actually wrap it up. We'll take a question. Let's take it in the tea time. You can come up and talk to us about it. But what we've learned today is that you've seen thought processes from 5 different people, 5 different companies, 5 different geographies. You've realized about our ideas. You've realized about the plans, how people hire, how you're retained. And hope this was an educational or something that at least one thing that y'all can take home from this. And if you're able to do that, it'll be really success. It'll be really, we'll call this a panel success. So with that, thank you panelists. Thank you so much. And let's break for tea.
One quick comment for everybody. This is something that keeps coming up in all our events. All of these years, there's a strong interest in entrepreneurship among our audience. And there are also, because of the nature of our community, many entrepreneurs. So there are several people in this room who could be on this panel but haven't because the stage is only so big, right? So I know a few of you, but for everybody else, the younger people, if you're willing to take questions on entrepreneurship, because there are a lot, could you just raise your hand? Like if you've been through the process and you're happy to chat with younger people who have questions. So I know a handful there. I know Shahid's there, Sid's over here, Chris at the back, a few other folks whom I don't know. But just look around, you'll see the hands. Catch them now during the break, ask your questions.